23rd of October 1983, Dor, South Yorkshire, England. Basil Lener, his wife Avil, and their children Richard and Nicola had settled in for the night. They'd been hosting their eldest daughter's wedding earlier that day. Unbeknownst to them, a stranger armed with a knife had broken into their house.
He creeps up the stairs and mistakenly thinks that Nicola is in the room with the bridesmaid's dress on the door and goes in. He discovers that it's not Nicola, it's Richard. He wastes no time in killing Richard Lener with a series of vicious knife wounds.
The deadly commotion woke Father Basil, who went to investigate. He, too, was stabbed to death. The killer was 42-year-old Arthur Hutchinson, a violent criminal and rapist who was on the run from the police. After murdering Basil and Richard, he made his way to Mother Avil's bedroom, where he stabbed her repeatedly.
She had 26 marks of violence on her body. It was much more violence than he needed to actually end her life.
The killer then made his way to 18-year-old Nicola's bedroom. He raped the teenager multiple times before going on the run once again.
You'd had this very happy occasion, this big family wedding, and then 12 hours later, the world's been turned on its head, and poor Nicola, her life changed forever.
His history of violence culminated in an unthinkable attack, a sadistic rape of an 18-year-old girl, having just murdered her parents and elder brother in cold blood. This makes Arthur Hutchinson one of the world's most evil killers. On the morning of October the 24th, 1983, workmen made their way to Basil Lener's house to dismantle a marquee in the garden. They made a startling discovery.
They found Nicola in a most dreadful state, totally traumatized. They called the police and they realized the horrific nature of the crime. The major incident team were called out, and I was part of that.
He wreaked utter devastation in a matter of minutes. He took out 3 prominent members of the local community and raped a young woman.
News of the wedding day massacre hit the headlines and spread fear across the whole of the nation. The killer, Arthur Hutchinson, had been on the run for 26 days and quickly became Britain's most wanted man.
It's only a few years after the arrest of Peter Sutcliffe, the Yorkshire Ripper, and you'd seen a reign of terror. People remembered very quickly. And you've got a knife man on the loose, a man who's been prepared to kill 3 people in cold blood. So very quickly, people changing their patterns of behaviour, and women wouldn't go out at night unaccompanied.
As fear gripped the nation, the brazen killer, who had a history of violent and sexual offences, even taunted the police whilst on the run and gave himself the nickname The Fox.
I sleep right there in the top of that night. A lot of hawks. No, that.
He wants to be recognised. He wants infamy. He wants to develop a brand. He wants people to fear him.
He's sadistic. He's cruel. He has no empathy for anyone.
I'm charged with burglary. You say, no, you know who I am, don't you? So I'm not going to put myself up. You're not? No.
This killer's story begins on the 19th of February, 1941. Arthur Hutchinson was born in Hartlepool, in the northeast of England.
Arthur Hutchinson was born into an extraordinary family. In fact, it was 2 families in the end. His mother, Louise, had a husband called Cuthbert, with whom she had 6 children. But they also had a lodger called Arthur Hutchinson, with whom Louise had 2 further children, the first of which was Arthur Hutchinson, named after his father.
Mother Louise eventually set up home with Arthur Hutchinson Sr. For their son, Arthur, growing up wasn't easy.
His siblings didn't like him. They made fun of him. He was an illegitimate child and they were legitimate children. So right from the word go, he was an outsider. He was excluded. He was marginalised even within his own family.
But young Hutchinson was close to his mother and would often seek comfort from her.
There's not a lot of doubt in my mind that Arthur Hutchinson was Louise Riordan's favourite child. This was probably exacerbated by the fact he caught meningitis as a small boy and would therefore have been extremely ill. It was a nasty disease to catch as a young child. And then he rode into a lamppost on his bicycle, fracturing his skull.
And he was in a coma for 3 days. He had quite a significant injury to his head.
And what happens in things like head injuries, in some cases, it weakens inhibitory controls, and then you act out more impulsively than you might otherwise do.
I don't think that head injury led him to become a murderer. I think it might be a factor in the background, because we can see when we study convicted killers that there are higher rates of traumatic brain injury in them than there are in the general population. But it's certainly not a causative reason, and it's not an excuse.
At school, Hutchinson struggled academically and was often teased by his 5 sisters.
That type of bullying and teasing and humiliation of the child stays with people, and it harbors an enormous amount of anger. They just build up so much resentment of people that they want to get back at who hurt them.
Hutchinson's anger with his sisters, who were making his life a misery, was to display itself very forcefully at the age of 7 when he stabbed one of them with a pair of scissors.
As he grew older, Hutchinson became disruptive, and his behaviour towards the opposite sex was disturbing.
From a very, very early age, Hutchinson was interested in sex, and he took the most profound interest in it.
At age 11, he finds himself in juvenile court for indecent assault. Now, this is a really, really serious crime for an 11-year-old to be committing. And these crimes do not just emerge out of the blue. There tends to be an escalation of behaviour. So this suggests to me that you have a child here who doesn't care about harming other people.
He must have only just hit puberty. But I think the moment he did, every kind of hormone in the young Hutchinson took off.
This is an opportunity to intervene. And for somebody to be committing this serious an offence at this age tells me that they are capable of much, much worse.
In his late teens, he got involved in petty crime and would steal cars and switch their licence plates.
Here was a classic case of a bad lad gone worse. You know, he started out being a bit of a handful as a boy, graduated into petty crime, got involved with the police, and an unhealthy attitude towards women.
Despite his reputation as a bad boy, he was popular with women.
He was obviously very attractive. He lived in a comparatively small area. His reputation must have preceded him, but he was one of those ultimate bad boys that girls want to change.
I think Arthur's attitude to women was that they all fancied him. It was as simple as that. He had this unquenchable belief that women wanted to be with him, wanted to be around him, wanted to sleep with him.
Throughout his teens, Hutchinson had 19 appearances in front of the magistrates, including 4 charges of sexual intercourse with girls under the age of 16. After leaving school, Hutchinson joined the National Coal Board as a trainee miner.
He's soon sacked from that job because he breaches safety regulations. He's somebody who doesn't respect rules. He doesn't think they apply to him.
He went into a number of professions. He worked as a farm labourer. He travelled with gypsies. He worked with the circus.
These are jobs that involve him kind of going off the grid. They're not regular jobs. And I think he's got that kind of proneness to boredom, that need for stimulation.
Eventually, he did settle down, and in 1960, aged 18, he married his neighbour in Hartlepool, and they had a child together. But Hutchinson quickly went back to his thieving ways, and he lost his job as a milkman for stealing wages.
He was incorrigible. Whatever job he took, he couldn't keep. He wanted to break the law. That's the only thing he really knew about.
The marriage became strained and the couple split up. Not long after, he met a teenager who quickly became pregnant. But again, this relationship didn't last either. And it wouldn't be long before Hutchinson's deviant desires would surface. A year later, in 1963, aged 22, he was jailed for unlawful sexual intercourse with an underage girl.
There are no filters, there are no boundaries, there are no moral breaks on his behaviour that stand in his way. He's one of these people, when he wants to do something, he will simply go and do it. When he wants to obtain something, he will go and take it. This is somebody who is potentially very, very dangerous.
With the charges now mounting against sexual predator Hutchinson, he showed no signs of stopping. The crimes he would go on to commit would be more violent and soon turn deadly. After his release from prison, Hutchinson found work in a chicken factory where he met his second wife. The couple married just months later and moved in with his mother.
The second wife was only 16 and he was 27. She was rapidly pregnant and he beat her. She once said anything could provoke him, no matter what. She also said that at one point she saw him knock his mother halfway across the room from her chair.
He felt that he was invincible and that he could charm his way to anybody. And at the other side of him, he was a very savage individual and could turn very, very quickly. He had this sort of split personality that enabled him to get through his type of life.
This is a person who enjoys controlling women. He enjoys having a woman look after him, have a roof over his head and dinner on the table. And this marriage is one that is violent. It's one that's abusive. His wife describes how he was promiscuous and controlling.
Unsurprisingly, after just 3 years, this marriage also failed.
The day he left her, he beat her up in the street, knocked her to the ground, kicked her. This was a man of violent tendency.
This is a pattern of behaviour with him. This man is a parasite who feeds off the women in his life, gets what he wants, and then discards them.
Hutchinson's appetite for sex continued, and in 1972, he was convicted of unlawful sexual intercourse and received another prison sentence, this time for 3.5 years. By 1978, Hutchinson was being investigated for suspected social security fraud. He was adamant that his half-brother Dino had tipped the authorities off.
He set off after his half-brother with a sawn-off shotgun, determined to end his life. Dino, thankfully, escaped, and Hutchinson was caught, and indeed imprisoned.
Hutchinson was sentenced to yet more time behind bars, this time a 5-year sentence in Leeds prison for attempted murder and for carrying a firearm.
Hutchinson is somebody who loves being in control. Now, when he is sentenced to a custodial term, that takes away a lot of his power. I think he would be feeling very resentful. He'd be ruminating. He'd be fantasizing about what he was going to do when he was eventually released.
Alone with his thoughts, Hutchinson's deviant sexual desires were once again ignited. He read in a newspaper about a woman in the north of Selby who'd recently come into money. She quickly became his next target.
For some reason, he became fixated on, became obsessed with. She was divorced, she had a new boyfriend, she had a lot of money. Throughout the course of his day, he's looking at different people to see who he could get over on, how he could go about it.
And she moved to live somewhere just north of Selby in a bungalow, right on the edge of a field. And Hutchinson had read this story and had made drawings and sketches of what this bungalow would be like in the back of this paperback book. And on his release from Leeds prison, he was allowed to take the book with him.
In September 1982, 6 months after his release, Hutchinson made his way to the woman's bungalow and broke in. He stole a checkbook and attempted to withdraw cash from a local bank, but was refused. Penniless, he came up with another plan.
And he then decided that he would follow this lady and present himself to her, and she was bound to fall for his charm and want to marry him. He planned very, very carefully. He set up a hideaway in a field near to the bungalow, watching the lady and her male friend.
He saw the woman in the house making love to her boyfriend. He waits for the boyfriend to leave.
When the male friend left on the second night, he then presented himself absolutely naked to this lady.
Hutchinson made his advances, which were quickly rebuked by the horrified woman. Unable to accept the rejection, Hutchinson raped her.
Hutchinson is a misogynist, and he feels entitled to use and abuse women. He hasn't had access to women in the time that he's been in custody. So by the time his release comes around, he feels entitled to go and take what he wants.
There was a struggle, and he was wearing a St. Christopher medal on a chain around his neck, and that was broken. The very sensible lady advised him to take the medallion to a jeweller's shop to be repaired, and he did that. And of course, the first thing she did was to drive to the police station and report the horrendous attack. They dispatched police officers and caught him just coming out of the jeweller's and arrested him. They took him back to Selby police station, and of course, as he walked in, there she was in the entrance foyer, and there was a huge battle with officers.
Just months after his release, Hutchinson found himself back in police custody. He was determined not to be sent to prison for the rape and decided to take action.
Hutchinson is to appear at Selby Magistrates Court, which is actually part of the police station. They were joined, so he's taken it. He persuades the two officers to uncuff him because he wants to go to the lavatory. They make the mistake of uncuffing him. He jumps through the window, cutting himself in the process, but then lands on a mesh which is protected by barbed wire. He cuts his leg really seriously on the barbed wire, but doesn't stop, jumps over the barbed wire onto the pavement and sprints off.
Here's a potentially dangerous man, certainly somebody who should be under lock and key, pending investigations, and he's now roaming Yorkshire free and unfettered. Nobody knows quite where he is. Nobody has the first clue of how to find him again, and he goes to ground. He just disappears.
The police, not surprisingly, launch a manhunt. He's an extremely dangerous prisoner.
Hutchinson lived rough for the next 3 days, but with his leg badly cut, on the 2nd of October, he decided to seek help.
He made his way the 19 miles to Doncaster and was treated at Doncaster Royal Infirmary.
It's obviously dishevelled. He's been living on dandelion roots and whatever he can forage for the last 3 days, mud all over him because he's had to crawl along gutters. His trousers are ripped to shreds. Nobody in A&E thinks to say, well, how did all this happen? Or if they did, he had a very clever way of describing it.
Unaware that he was a wanted man, medical staff tended to his wound.
And they treated it, dressed it, but gave him certain instructions that the dressing needs changing and you need antibiotics and you need to come back.
Hutchinson returned to the hospital 2 days later before going on the run again. During this time, he committed a number of burglaries to obtain cash.
Nobody has a clue where to find him, and he's been on the run for about 3.5 weeks before he finally washes up in Sheffield, in Dore, a suburb just to the south of the city centre. He would have been getting a bit desperate by this point. He's been living almost literally in hedge bottoms. He's chanced upon this wedding party in this prosperous part of Sheffield, a large, expensive-looking house, marquee tacked on the side.
The owners of the house were hosting a wedding reception for their eldest daughter. Hutchinson crept onto the grounds of the property and hid.
The house is owned by a local solicitor, 59-year-old Basil Lener, along with his wife, who's 55, Avil. She's a doctor. Also attending the wedding is their son, Richard, who's 28, and their younger daughter, Nicola, who's 18 and is a bridesmaid at the event.
Over 200 guests gathered on the 23rd of October to help celebrate what should have been one of the happiest days of their life.
A lavish affair in Sheffield, a lot of champagne, a lot of food, and a very, very happy day. It sort of draws to a close, gets past 7 or thereabouts. It's getting dark. Hutchinson is still hiding in the garden. Bride and groom depart for a local hotel. Basil, Avil and their son Richard depart for dinner with a relative not far away. But Nicola decides to stay.
And at that time, unknown to everyone, of course, Hutchinson had made his way into the back garden of the house and had been observing what had taken place. And he stayed like that in that area for quite some time, because the family returned home probably about 11 o'clock, and then they retired to bed.
Under the cover of darkness, Hutchinson broke into the Leitner's house. Armed with a knife, he was about to carry out the next stage in his sadistic plan.
The motivation was sexual in this case, and in this particular case, he saw the young girl, he became fixated on her, like he has done before, and his goal was to rape her.
Hutchinson creeps up the stairs and mistakenly thinks that Nicola is in the room with the bridesmaid's dress on the door and goes in. He discovers that it's not Nicola, it's Richard.
And Richard's out of bed in a flash and fights back. But Hutchinson has the knife, so he prevails.
Richard was stabbed multiple times in the chest. The impact was so brutal that one stab wound cut through 4 of his ribs. The commotion woke the rest of the family.
Mr. Leitner had obviously gone to investigate. Their bedroom was on the ground floor, and the guest bedrooms were upstairs, and he was actually climbing up the stairs when he was attacked.
Now you have Hutchinson, who's already killed Richard, stabs Basil in the throat twice, killing him, and stabs him again in the back. Now he's only got 2 women in the house, and he knows it.
Mrs. Leitner, hearing some noise, went out of her bedroom on the ground floor, and Hutchinson went down the stairs again and attacked her. She tried to put her hands out to stop the assault on her and had grabbed hold of the knife. It was a huge knife, probably one of the biggest Bowie knives I've ever seen.
Again, Hutchinson overpowered his victim and killed her.
There are 3 dead bodies in this house in Dore in Sheffield, and 1 terrified 18-year-old.
You can't really imagine how it must have been in that house for those awful, awful few minutes. And within a few minutes, both Nicky's parents are dead too. She is the last person alive in that house.
The merciless killer then made his way up the stairs once again.
He set his sights on Nicola. She was what he wanted to get to, essentially. He went into her bedroom, he put the light on, he threatened to kill her if she didn't do what he wanted her to do. He marched her out to the marquee in the garden where the family had been celebrating a wedding earlier on that day, and he raped her.
Hutchinson takes her back upstairs again, past the body of Basil, back into the bedroom, where he proceeds to rape her not once more, but twice more.
With her family lying dead around her, Nicola's survival instincts kicked in.
She pretended to enjoy it when Hutchinson was raping her. Hutchinson was an incredibly narcissistic individual. I think Nicola's behaviour towards him and the performance that she was able to put on kind of pacified him a little bit, validated him, and actually saved her own life.
The heartless killer showed no signs of emotion towards the deadly and bloody chaos he'd created.
After Hutchinson had murdered the family, after he'd raped Nicola, he went and drank some of the family's champagne and ate some of their cheese. Now, this appears to be completely bizarre behaviour. Somebody's gone from murder and rape 1 minute to eating and drinking the next. But Hutchinson is somebody who simply follows his own wants and his own desires. He's hungry and he's thirsty. It is as simple as that. He is so unaffected by what he's done.
It's almost dawn. And for some mysterious reason, he ties Nicola up again, covers her in the coverlet. There's blood from his knee on her bedclothes, and says, "Don't suffocate," and leaves.
As the dawn broke, he made good his escape and then went on the run.
The following day, workmen arrived at the Leitner's house to dismantle the marquee.
They realised something was wrong, they could get no response, went into the house, saw signs of disturbance, came across the bodies.
And then they discover Nicola. Nicola is clearly traumatised. I mean, it's been the most terrible, terrible experience. There can be nothing that could have prepared any 18-year-old for that sort of ordeal at the hands of a monster.
The workmen called the police, and Michael Burdis was part of the major incident team. 18-year-old Nicola Leitner was now their key witness.
She was extremely traumatised. We assigned officers to work with her. They produced an artist's impression, and we used a local artist, and he produced a picture.
The police now had a good idea what the killer looked like. They just didn't know who he was.
At this stage, no one had actually joined the dots between Selby and Sheffield. At this point, nobody was saying the man who escaped from Selby 3.5 weeks ago is the man who's committed these murders.
The police set up an incident room in the local village hall, and forensic teams quickly set about trying to gather any evidence that might lead them to the killer.
We got probably 300 different people that we needed to identify to see whether they had seen or heard anything that might have given us some clues as to who was responsible. We discovered a champagne bottle on the kitchen table, and on that bottle we discovered a palm print and some fingerprints, and we were able to discover a fairly large piece of cheese in the refrigerator which had bite marks in it, and we managed to get an impression of the teeth that had made them.
News of the murders hit the headlines, and the city of Sheffield was gripped by fear.
Not surprisingly, the people of Yorkshire, and particularly those around Sheffield, were devastated that 3 people should be killed on their doorstep in one night, on the evening of a wedding. The tremble that would have gone through the whole community was literally extraordinary. And what's more, the perpetrator has not been caught. There is a man on the loose.
2 days after the murder, the police had a major breakthrough with the help of Nicola Leitner's description of the murderer.
We received a call from North Yorkshire Police from Selby to inform me that they had experienced a man escaping from their police station, and he'd been arrested and charged originally with a very serious case of rape, and it seemed to be the same type of crime that had occurred in our circumstances. And we were able to compare the picture with a photograph taken only a few weeks earlier by Selby Police Station, and it was almost a carbon copy. It was an amazing likeness. We were able to get his fingerprints from the North Yorkshire Police, and our fingerprint experts compared them and immediately said, this is the man. So we knew within 2 days that we were looking for Arthur Hutchinson.
Desperate to catch their man, on the 27th of October, 4 days after the attack, the police took the unusual steps of releasing information on their #1 suspect to the press.
It was from Selby Magistrates Court a month ago that Arthur Hutchinson escaped from police custody. He got out through a toilet window. Hutchinson, said to be a physical fitness fanatic, then climbed onto the roof of a police van which was parked in the backyard, climbed over a back wall and ran off.
It's a very rare event that the police will actually name who they're looking for. But on this event, we took the decision that the public were at danger and at risk from this man being at large in the surrounding area. It was important we should say to the public, look out for this man, but if you have seen him, keep away from him.
And those posters went up everywhere. They made a big, big impact.
There was a major front page story in a northeastern newspaper which announced that Arthur Hutchinson was our #1 suspect and prime suspect, and that's who we were looking for.
The terrified public were keen to help the police with their search for the killer.
It also brought with it additional problems. We had over 3,000 calls, 1,000 calls in the first day from members of the public thinking that they'd seen him. And some of them probably had, but a good number hadn't.
Hutchinson had now fled nearly 40 miles away, as far as Nottinghamshire. His name and face was all over the news. So on the 30th of October, he decided to call the Yorkshire Post.
Hello? Hello? This is Hutchinson. The one that those police are on one hot for. Tell you what, I've never left the area from Salisbury, right? I've only straight as far as Doncaster and back to Salisbury again. I would smash at helicopters and dogs. I'm not leaving that area until I sort out what I want to sort out. I sleep by day and I travel at night. I'm charged with burglary. Yeah. Right, so now you know who I am, don't you? Yeah. I'm a hoax. No, right.
He tried to put people off the scent. In fact, he'd been travelling a great deal more than he let on in the phone call with the Yorkshire Post.
And in these calls, this is just a narcissistic monologue. This is all me, me, me. There is no mention whatsoever about his victims. If anything, he's taking the victim role for himself.
So I'm not going to put myself up. You're not? No.
Hutchinson revelled in the media spotlight.
He started writing letters to the Yorkshire Post, taunting the police. That's when he gave himself the ludicrous nickname, the Fox, because he could slip in and out unseen, and the police couldn't catch him. And he boasted of having been in and out of Doncaster 4 times without being caught.
When you look at someone like Jack the Ripper, for example, Jack the Ripper didn't give himself the name. The media gave him the name. But in this case, Hutchinson gave himself the name. He's the Fox. He wants to present himself in a certain way to other people. Sly, cunning.
The police hired in a behavioural psychologist, and she put her finger on it straight away and said, this is a man bigging himself up. This is about him, his reputation, and his self-image, the master criminal that the police couldn't possibly catch.
The context is really important here. Only a few years prior to this, we'd seen the conviction of the Yorkshire Ripper, and we saw the kind of celebrity status that was attached to Peter Sutcliffe. And I think Arthur Hutchinson wanted a piece of that. He felt like he deserved that kind of recognition.
Hutchinson had now been on the run for 6 days since murdering 3 members of the same family. The police had deployed all of their resources into finding him. 9 forces joined in the hunt. Spotter planes and helicopters scanned the Peak District, but there was no sign of the deadly fugitive.
Hutchinson is intent on evading capture. He starts to alter his appearance, starts to use disguises. He moves around a lot, mostly on buses. There were sightings of him at various points, particularly at the end of October, about 8 days after the killings, in a pub, but nothing happens.
The brazen killer thought he was invincible, but the police were closing in on him.
We were fortunate enough to know that a brooch had been manufactured specifically to give to Basil Lener, and that brooch was missing, and it was quite obvious that Hutchinson had stolen it. And so we were able to circulate pictures into jewellers in surrounding towns, and we were able to trace some of his movements into Nottinghamshire, Mansfield, Worksop, before he then moved further back north.
With the media frenzy and the killer's taunting messages, the pressure was mounting to catch the killer, and the police had come up with a plan to lure Hutchinson in by leaking information about the killer to the media.
McBurdis was aware that Hutchinson had injured his knee on a piece of barbed wire when he escaped from Selby police station, and used this very cleverly by playing up the injury, that it might be worse than Hutchinson suggested, and that he was highly likely to find he got an infected wound that might even turn gangrenous. And he planted that thought, knowing that Hutchinson would get to know about it.
Michael and the team also decided to exploit another of Hutchinson's weaknesses.
Well, he was close to his mother, and eventually we persuaded his mother to allow us to broadcast the fact that she was seriously ill, which was true. She did have a heart condition, and we arranged for her to be moved from her house by ambulance. And that was well publicised. We thought that that would attract Hutchinson to the area, which it did.
Concerned about his mother's health, Hutchinson made his way back to Hartlepool.
He knows the police are going to be keeping a watch on his mother's house, and he makes the mistake of ringing her, and the police have tapped the phone. And he says, "I'm coming tonight. I'll be with you at 4 a.m. And the police have got the information. They now know the time he's going to arrive at the house, and they also, crucially, know the likely route that he's going to take. So they flooded the area with police and tracker dogs and waited and waited and waited.
Nearly 400 police officers and dogs lay in wait for the killer to appear.
And they got a lucky break. A farmer out feeding his stock late at night came back in the house. His wife had been watching him through the window, and she said, "Did you see him?" And the farmer said, "Did I see who?" And she said, "Arthur Hutchinson. I'm sure that was Arthur Hutchinson." And of course it was. So they rang the police. This draws the net in a little bit tighter still.
Eventually, on the 5th of November, Hutchinson was spotted by police aircraft near a farmhouse near Dalton Piercy, Cleveland. Police dog handlers quickly closed in.
He sees them, brandishes a knife, and also wraps his jacket round his arm in case the dogs bite him, and runs. He's not going to outrun 2 police dogs and 2 police officers. He realises that and sits down holding the knife. Now, some have speculated that Hutchinson was intent on taking his own life at that point. He's pointing the knife towards his stomach. The reality was, I don't think he was. I've always believed that that was bravado. He was a coward.
After 39 days on the run across 9 counties, the deadly game was finally up for Arthur Hutchinson.
The dog handlers were able to make that arrest. It was a long wait.
With Hutchinson now in custody, further evidence was discovered from during his time on the run.
He made a recording on a little portable tape recorder, and he referred to himself as a fox there and how he would overcome all the difficulties that he was experiencing. And it gave us clues as to how we might use that knowledge of his mentality and his state of mind to our advantage, really.
The trial took place on the 4th of September 1984 at Durham Crown Court. Nicola Leitner would have to face her attacker.
The judge, Mr. Justice McNeill, decides that Nicola Leitner can be identified because it was local knowledge that she had been attacked, which meant that the Leitners were also public knowledge.
It was the first time in British history that the police used video footage to show the crime scene.
For the first time, here were the police shooting a video moving around the house, piecing together the story in the order that they understood from the forensic evidence that events had happened. And the jury were shown it, which was another first.
Hutchinson took to the stand, but he denied any role in the murders or the rape.
I remember a fairly slight figure, unkempt, but with that slightly cocksure, just the way he held himself. A man who fancies himself a bit. And when he was giving evidence, almost everything he said, he was spinning a yarn.
As the delusional killer continued to deny any responsibilities for the murders and the rape, the overwhelming evidence was presented. Blood samples that Hutchinson had left at the scene were also analysed.
Now, the police have very convincing evidence. He has a very rare blood group, one of only 50,000 in Britain. And his blood group is on Nicola Leitner's bed.
The police also had impressions of the bite marks from the cheese left at the Leitner's house.
And we were able to link them to Hutchinson because he'd had dental treatment whilst he was in prison, so we were able to match the dental records with the teeth marks in the cheese, which was quite a unique feature of any inquiry, really.
It is pretty clear that they have a lot of evidence. As the police point out to him, look at this, and how do you explain your blood group, and how do you explain these teeth marks, and how do you explain this palm print? Gradually, he turns the story. He says, I'd met Nicola the night before in a pub. And she said, why don't you come round after the reception and we'll have consensual sex. It was an absolutely bizarre story.
It doesn't surprise me at all that he would come up with this. A guy like Hutchinson and any other type of career criminal, all they do is lie. They don't know how to tell the truth.
As the trial went on, Hutchinson continued to fabricate his version of events on that fateful night.
The way he seemed to operate was that when caught out in one story, he just segued into the next story. And when this story began to unravel, he pointed to a man called Mike Barron, a reporter with the Sunday Mirror, and said, he did this. You should ask him about these murders. He's the man who committed them. Poor Mike Barron was sitting there looking absolutely dropped on, gobsmacked.
He is literally plucking stuff out of thin air at this point in time. And obviously, this does not stand up whatsoever. But what it does do, it creates a distraction. It creates a sideshow. It diverts people's attention away from what he has actually done.
On the 14th of September, the jury of 6 men and 6 women took just 4 hours to reach their guilty verdicts for all 3 murder counts, the rape charge, and the charge of aggravated burglary. He was given 3 life sentences for the murders of Basil, Avil, and Richard Lener. In addition, 8 years for the rape of Nicola Lener and another 5 years for aggravated burglary.
When he was first convicted, he received a minimum sentence of 18 years, which was later upgraded to a whole life order by the Home Secretary, Liam Britton. Now, these are not sentences that are given out just like that. They are reserved for the most dangerous offenders in society. So I think this is testament to the evil things that this individual did and the desire to protect the public from him.
In 2008, Hutchinson appealed his life tariff, claiming it was a breach of his human rights. He was the first British prisoner to do so. His appeal was rejected, and subsequent appeals were also denied in 2015 and 2017.
I think this determination to challenge the sentence really is testament to his character. He's not taking responsibility for his actions. And for me, that indicates that this is an individual who has not changed. So as far as I'm concerned, Hutchinson is exactly where he needs to be.
Hutchinson was so arrogant, so conceited, that he committed a crime that never needed to have been committed. It was a monstrous act to take the lives of 3 completely innocent people in what? In the pursuit of a rape. It defies belief. It literally sends a shiver down my spine. This is a man of the most deep depravity.
Hutchinson was a sadistic sexual predator who preyed on the vulnerable and defenseless, even trying to kill his half-brother. His life as a career criminal culminated in a brutal triple murder of 3 members of the same family, along with raping the teenage daughter at knife point. To this day, he has denied his guilt and refuses to take responsibility for his crimes. Undoubtedly, that makes Arthur Hutchinson one of the world's most evil killers. On the 24th of February 1986, police in Talladega, Alabama, forced entry into the home of 24-year-old Sherry Weathers. The profoundly deaf mother of 2 had not turned up to school for nearly a week, and the reason soon became clear. Sherry and her 2 young children had been strangled to death and piled on top of each other in the shape of a cross.
The utter callousness of it, of not only killing them, strangling them, but then posing them to be discovered. It's an act of a vile human being.
The horrific scene will forever be etched in the minds of the 2 detectives who worked on the case.
When you see something like that, you can't help but think about your own child. This could happen to my child, too.
And so now you know you got to do everything you possibly do to bring this person to justice.
The killer was a 31-year-old artist named Daniel Siebert, and his macabre masterpiece was far from complete. 2 more bodies would soon be discovered, but the police had no idea where to find him.
He was in the wind. We didn't know where he was, but we knew that somebody's gonna die.
until he was caught.
Daniel Siebert had made his mark as one of the world's most evil killers. When 33-year-old Daniel Siebert was sentenced to death for the murder of Linda Jarman on the 17th of April 1987, it signaled the end of the killer's cold-blooded career. On the 19th of August, he received a second death sentence for the murders of Sherry Weathers and her 2 children. Officially found guilty of 5 murders, authorities believe that Siebert was responsible for many other deaths across the US in the mid-1980s. Homicide detective Eugene Jacks was part of the policing team who hunted the killer for over 6 months before his dramatic arrest in September 1986.
He killed Sherry because she was deaf, and she would never amount to anything because she was deaf. He killed those 2 little boys because their mother was dead, and they would never amount to anything because they wouldn't have a mother. He killed Linda Jarman to get her car. He says he killed Linda Odom because she was a racist. I think he just killed people because he liked to kill people.
In a series of interviews with the killer, Eugene learned a lot about just how callous Daniel Siebert could be.
If you didn't know what kind of monster he really was, you could actually like him, but he had no compassion for anyone, no feelings for anyone. These people didn't matter to him, not at all. He didn't hate them. He just didn't have any feelings for them, none whatsoever.
This killer's story begins in Mattoon, Illinois, a small city in America's Midwest.
Siebert was born in 1954, so these were the post-war years in the US. The economy was starting to boom. We have the idea of the American dream, but I think when we look behind closed doors at his family life, it was anything but that. There are reports of abuse from his father towards his mother and towards him.
Father was an aggressive man. He mistreated both Danny and his mother.
He was a man who was violent and abusive and controlling. And this is the role model of masculinity that Siebert grows up with. So I think that there is a real sense of shame that Siebert maintains throughout his life. And having been victimized, I think that Siebert was always trying to turn the tables and be the aggressor.
Siebert's parents divorced in 1968, just a month before his 14th birthday. The young man's life began to spiral out of control.
He became addicted to drugs. He had got into prostitution, himself acting as a male prostitute.
I think there were several warning signs in Siebert's childhood and adolescence that point towards a very troubled individual. He's somebody who could not make relationships work with other people. He didn't relate to his peers particularly well. There was a feeling of rejection from the family environment. And it's this sense of isolation and later the choice to be isolated, which is something that's very concerning for me.
There was nothing about him that could be described as ordered. He was like a Catherine wheel, going round and round in every single direction, a firework.
Aged 18 and looking for some stability in his life, Siebert enrolled with the military in 1972.
Siebert's decision to try and join the Marines is a really, really interesting part of this case because it's what that decision symbolises. The Marines symbolise this alpha male, this toughness, this kind of real American hero type persona. And I think Siebert wanted to try and live up to that.
Unfortunately, he couldn't deal with the order the Marines brought him. And quickly, well, within a year, went absent without leave.
After being dishonorably discharged from the Marines, Siebert was once again at a loose end. But the troubled young man had a hidden talent that soon began to flourish.
One thing that Siebert excelled at was as an artist. It was the only thing he was good at.
You can tell by looking at some of his drawings, it was just, I think he was expressing his fantasies in his drawings. That's how he got started with that. He was quite a person. I mean, he had an engaging personality. Enjoyable to talk with, really. If you didn't know what kind of person he was down deep, you would actually enjoy sitting and talking with him.
But life for the charming young artist remained difficult.
Between 1972 and 1978, he was principally based in Los Angeles, and there were a series of offences, drug offences, some violence, charges of battery. It was a life lived on the edge, on the fringes of society and on the fringes of the law.
By January 1979, 24-year-old Siebert was living in Las Vegas. He was in a relationship with a male partner. It was reportedly an abusive one that ended with him fatally stabbing his lover.
This homicide was a particularly vicious one because Siebert stabbed his partner 29 times. Now, for me, that means that he has made that decision 29 times to put the knife in again. This was somebody who knew what they were doing. They knew what they were doing was wrong, and they chose to do it anyway.
Despite the viciousness of the slaying, at his subsequent trial, Siebert was charged with manslaughter, not murder.
Siebert insisted that it was a matter of self-defense. How it can be to stab someone that many times is slightly beyond me. But it did seek to throw into doubt whether it was a premeditated murder, and therefore added strength to the argument that it was a crime of passion.
I think because this was a homosexual relationship, there was a tendency for the court to just want to accept that narrative and put this case to bed because there was still stigma around homosexuality in the US at this time. And I think that was perhaps what drove this offence in the first place, because a lot of violence has its roots in shame. I think Siebert was fundamentally ashamed of who he was. He never accepted who he was. He never felt that society would accept him for his true identity. So I think this early offence is so important, and the criminal justice system's reaction to it was just not good enough.
Siebert was sentenced to 10 years in prison, but after serving just 2, he escaped while on work detail in December 1981.
Now, we really do have a lethal weapon waiting to go off. While he's on the run, he kidnaps a woman at gunpoint in San Francisco, and she only escapes by jumping out of the moving car on the Golden Gate Bridge. It is a remarkable escape, because in my own mind, I'm not the slightest doubt that he intended to kill her.
Siebert was recaptured the following day in nearby Oakland and returned to prison. An extra year was added to his sentence, but in 1985, he was freed on parole on the proviso that he would return to court to face charges for the abduction and assault he'd committed during his brief escape. Due to attend court in San Francisco in December 1985, Siebert didn't turn up. His next known whereabouts were over 800 miles away in Tucson, Arizona, where he was found hitchhiking and heading east.
But now, Daniel Siebert is not calling himself Daniel Siebert, he's calling himself Daniel Spence. He's given a lift by a man called Donald Hedren, who is on his way to Alabama. Before the journey comes to an end, Donald has offered Spence a post as a volunteer at the Alabama Institute for the Deaf and Blind, in which Hedren works.
Alabama Institute for Deaf and Blind is a big part of the Talladega community. It's actually a community of its own, or a family of its own, you might say.
And he has, superficially at least, the perfect cover. Artistic young man, happy to volunteer at an institute for those with deafness and blindness.
Leaving his troubles in California far behind him, Siebert settled down in Talladega, Alabama in January 1986. Working at the AIDB, he had a new identity and a new community of friends.
After he arrived here, people realized that he was an accomplished artist, and he was asked to do a mural at AIDB, which he did. And that's one of the reasons he stayed here for a while, was doing that mural.
Once again, he hid in plain sight. The affable art volunteer, friend of Donald, welcome in the Institute. And then, and it's almost heartbreaking, he meets Sherry Ann Weathers, a 24-year-old deaf mother of 2 small boys, and they form a relationship.
A new circle of friends had welcomed 31-year-old Daniel Siebert into their lives with open arms. But they had no idea they'd allowed a brutal killer into their close-knit community. Siebert spent much of his time at the apartment of his new girlfriend, 24-year-old Sherry Weathers. By the 24th of February, Sherry, a single mother of 2, hadn't turned up at the school for almost a week. Her concerned friends contacted the authorities.
In February 1986, the police department received a call for a welfare check at Sunrise Apartments in Talladega. Police was dispatched. Officer Tom Byerman was the first on the scene. When he entered Sherry Weathers' apartment, he discovered the bodies of Sherry Weathers and the 2 boys. He immediately backed out, locked the door, and called for investigation.
Eugene was joined on the case by an investigator from the district attorney's office, Dennis Siebert.
We arrived at the apartments, and the police department had already had the scene roped off. And we met the other investigators, went into the apartment, and as you walk into the room, there's a bedroom, and then there's a living room, and there's a kitchen. And right in the center of the living room and the kitchen, you see 3 bodies.
It's quite horrible. I haven't forgotten it after all these years. One of the next door neighbors had heard the 2 little boys playing in a tub. He got them out of the bed. He strangled the 2 little boys.
He actually woke them up because they were in bed asleep. He wanted them to know that they were being killed. He wanted them to feel that fear.
And he stacked their bodies on top of the mother.
It looked like it formed a cross. That's my first impression.
Sherry Weathers and her 2 sons, 5-year-old Chad and 4-year-old Joseph, had been strangled to death 5 days earlier on the 19th of February. It was a sickening scene, even for seasoned detectives, but the team knew they needed to stay professional and not let their emotions get in the way of their police work.
You know the minute you walk into that scene, you know this is a death penalty case. And you know things have to be done differently. Everything has to be perfect, everything has to be exact, everything has to be documented. I's dotted, T's crossed, because you know where this is headed to. Because you know a murder of 2 or more is going to be a death penalty case. And then the emotional part hits you, you know, this is a young mother. This is 2 young children had their lives ahead of them. What kind of person would do this? I mean, emotionally it hits you. That's the second thing. After reality is what you got, then emotionally you're hit, you know, especially if you have children.
When you see something like that, you can't help but think about your own child. This could happen to my child too. It's something that you just don't forget about it.
Just as the 2 investigators were getting to grips with their harrowing day, some more worrying news came in.
We're in the middle of processing that scene. We'd been there probably 2 or 3 hours processing the scene for evidence. And then we were notified that Linda Jarman, who was a friend of Sherry Weathers, she did not show up for classes that day.
She lived in an adjoining apartment, not to this building, but to the next building. So Dennis and I went to her apartment, and we discovered her on the bed in the bedroom, and she'd been strangled.
33-year-old Linda Jarman, a deaf teacher at the same institute where Sherry was a student, had been murdered in cold blood.
He used a sock and just strangled her in her own bed. Of course, most people don't know what a VCR is these days and times, but back in those days, VCR was worth some money, so he stole her VCR in order to get money to travel further.
Linda Jarman's cream-colored car was also missing. The team would report their findings to former Talladega County District Attorney Robert Rumsey.
The evidence would show that after he strangled Sherry and Chad and Joey, that he went to Linda Jarman's apartment telling her that he had had a fight with Sherry and could he sleep on her couch. When she went back to bed and went to sleep, then he went in and he strangled her to get her car to leave.
After speaking to acquaintances and colleagues of Sherry and Linda, the detectives soon had a number one suspect who they discovered had been using a different alias.
At that point, we learned the name Daniel Spence from the people at the school. And we start running him in the computer to see if we find out Daniel Spence, who is he, where is he, everything we can find out. And it's determined that his name is actually Daniel Lee Siebert.
Once we developed him as a suspect and got his true identity, we'd put a nationwide pickup out on Daniel Siebert and Linda Jarman's car. He quickly became the prime suspect because Daniel Spence wasn't here and Linda Jarman's car was gone.
As the duo headed to Siebert's apartment building, they soon discovered there was another potential victim.
So we go knocking on the door, and there's no answer at the door. A neighbor comes out and says, "Why are you here?" I said, "We're looking to see Mr. Siebert." He said, "Well, he's not here." He said, "But I got to tell you, my girlfriend's missing." "Well, who's your girlfriend?" "It's Linda Odom." "How long has she been missing?" "Oh, 2 days. I hadn't seen her. She hadn't been home." "Well, do you know if she's ever connected with this guy here, Mr. Siebert?" "Yeah, they're kind of friends." "Well, you need to go to the police department and file a report."
In the space of 24 hours, 4 people had been found dead and another was missing. The investigators needed to find Daniel Siebert fast. And they soon had word from authorities over 350 miles north of Talladega.
We received information from Elizabethtown, Kentucky, that they had located Linda Jarman's car right off the interstate in Elizabethtown. That's when Dennis and I left here to go there to process the car for fingerprints and physical evidence.
And so they take us to the scene, and we go up an embankment from where the car was, and we find a campsite. We uncover a campsite. And Eugene and I, we find identification to the boys. We find information on Sherry Weathers and Linda Jarman all at that campsite. So we're fairly certain at this time we're on the right trail.
It was a huge breakthrough that confirmed Daniel Siebert was their man.
We got Daniel Siebert's fingerprints out of the car, plus other evidence we knew that tied to him, the type of cigarettes he smoked and the type of chewing gum that he chewed. We recovered photographs of women and children, women's cosmetics.
There were also some quite chilling items at this campsite. There were photos of the Weathers family, there were drawings of the Weathers family, and I think this emphasis on those victims is so significant in this case. This young mother and her 2 children seem to have quite a lot of importance for Siebert, because I think that he didn't feel they deserved to be alive. These boys were happy, they were loved and cared for by their mother. I think he felt a real sense of envy and resentment towards them. It was something that he wanted to relive, and I think those 3 murders of Sherry Weathers and her 2 children were the murders he was most proud of.
Despite being sure Siebert was responsible for at least 4 murders, the dangerous killer remained undetected.
Dennis and Eugene, both of them are excellent processors. They go and they're in Kentucky for quite a while, so they were up there several days. And he's in the wind. We didn't know where he was, but we knew that somebody's gonna die until he was caught.
In Linda's car, Eugene and Dennis had recovered an address book belonging to 31-year-old Siebert, which would eventually prove to be an important find.
I had one investigator. Her main job, I'd say, in this investigation was to stay in contact with known associates of Siebert. She had built a rapport with the girlfriend of Siebert's out there, and she promised that if she heard from him, she would call.
With every day that passed, the investigators knew Siebert could strike again at any moment.
Each day when you went to work, the first thing you did was start checking tips and leads on the possibility of where Siebert was. There wasn't a day that went by that you didn't do something on the Siebert case.
I don't know how many miles that we put on cars going from here to there to check out leads or information on Siebert or some of his friends or this, that, and the other. I mean, Lord, there's no telling.
As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, Siebert's location remained a mystery. The investigators desperately searched in vain. But in reality, he was over 900 miles from Talladega, Alabama, in New Jersey, and was about to claim another victim, 57-year-old tour guide Beatrice McDougal.
Daniel Siebert was in Atlantic City, staying in a hotel. On March 8th of 1986, walks by a room of a Mrs. McDougal that was a tour guide. She was fixing up for a reception for a hospitality room.
He would have deduced fairly quickly that she's a tour guide, so she's likely to have some cash on her.
Siebert was determined to get his hands on Beatrice's money by any means necessary.
And he goes in there and kills her. We don't know at that point that it's Siebert, but he's off and in the wind, and we ain't got a clue where he is after that. He just drops off the radar.
Siebert had stabbed Beatrice twice in the stomach and strangled her to death in an opportunistic attack.
I think that there is just no regard for the rights or the feelings of other people. It's all about him. He needs money at this point in time because he's on the run. He also wants to kill any potential witness to this crime of theft. So her life was just not considered valuable by him.
As Siebert remained undetected, the bad news continued for investigators in Alabama. On the 30th of March 1986, another victim of the 31-year-old artist would be discovered.
We're all actually at the DA's office working on another case, and we get a call that we've got a body. And just outside of Talladega, there's a little cemetery on the left-hand side of Alabama Highway 21. And there we find a skeletonized body. No question, it's been there for a long time. Decomposition has already come and gone. And we sift through everything. She's not buried or anything. She's been laid on top of the ground. We know it's female, and that's all we know. And we sift through the pine straw and everything, looking for all the bones, the teeth, and this, that, and the other that we could find to identify. And ultimately, she is identified as Linda Odom, the girl that was missing from the next door neighbor of Siebert.
The timeline suggested that 32-year-old cocktail waitress Linda Odom was Siebert's first victim. Siebert strangled Linda on the 19th of February 1986, meaning he'd killed 5 people on that one day.
Linda's body was taken to Siebert's apartment, and he disposes of the body by lowering it in sheets out of the window and then taking it to a nearby cemetery to dispose of it. And interestingly, Siebert said that when he was disposing of Linda's body, he started punching her. I mean, she was obviously dead at this point in time, but I think that was something that enhanced his feelings of control over this victim. And I think that sense of rage as well that he expresses at this point in time, the way that he's seeing this community who are so welcoming, who are so inclusive, who are loving towards one another, this is something that he feels he was entitled to when he was younger, something that he never had. And these people don't deserve it, according to him. So I think that's what's underlying all of this behavior.
This is a young girl. She didn't deserve what happened to her, but she just dumped in the cemetery. That kind of hurts your heart that somebody is so cruel to do something like that.
What the detectives in Alabama didn't know is that by now, Siebert was in prison in New Jersey, serving 61 days for assaulting a woman. When he was arrested for the altercation, he used the stolen Social Security card of murdered 5-year-old Chad Weathers as identification. This meant that no one had made the link between Siebert and any of the murders.
So during the time that Siebert was on the run, he actually used the identities of Sherry Weathers' 2 boys to gain new identification. And at this point in time, it was relatively easy to do that, to use a child's identity to get a social security number. But I think that the significance of this is more than just a practicality. I think there is something much more meaningful going on here. By possessing these children's names, by presenting yourself as them, you are owning them, you are possessing them, they are yours. And it's that extension of control over your victims.
After serving his time for the assault, Siebert was in police custody again in June 1986, this time in Virginia.
This young officer stops Siebert, and in the car he finds ropes and knives, ladies' belongings, photographs, just all types of things that just made him very suspicious of this man.
They checked the car and it was stolen. So he was arrested for car theft, being in possession of the stolen car. He was using the identity of Joey Weathers, using the Social Security card as identification. He made bond and he was gone.
Siebert was incredibly cunning, incredibly manipulative. I think he was well aware of the fact that law enforcement wasn't particularly well joined up in terms of interstate communication and sharing of information at this time. And I think he truly did take advantage of that.
In August, Siebert was yet again in another state, Maryland. He assaulted a woman in Baltimore, but wasn't captured by the police. He then headed back west towards Nashville, Tennessee. The investigators in Alabama still had no idea where he was, but a breakthrough was on the horizon. Detectives who'd reached out to people listed in Siebert's address book had been contacted by one of his ex-girlfriends in Nevada. She had news that would finally crack the case.
This lady calls from out there and says that she had just spoken with Daniel Siebert on the phone. And he told her what time it was where he was at. And she could hear thunder. And it was raining. So the investigator came and then told the rest of us about the call and that it was raining at that particular time.
With very little information, the investigators tried to trace the source of Siebert's call.
Said it was not easy to trace telephone calls, but they told us if we had any idea where he was, it would make it a lot easier. Otherwise, it could take 3 weeks to a month to trace it. I told the investigator, go call the National Weather Service, find out where it's raining in that time zone. It was raining in Tennessee. That was it in that time zone. We were able to use that information and trace the telephone call to Hurricane Mills in Tennessee to a little convenience store restaurant there.
It was a stunning revelation. Detectives could now pinpoint Siebert to the small community of Hurricane Mills, Tennessee, 70 miles west of Nashville.
So I called the district attorney, told him we're going to Tennessee. He said, okay, I'm coming with you.
There's no question we were keyed up because we spent 6 months and no telling how many trips, not me, but how many trips with the investigators and stuff had gone running down every little lead that they could come up with, which really had proved fruitless. But this is a live hit now.
So we all loaded up in cars, headed to Tennessee. I called TBI, which is Tennessee Bureau of Investigation. This is what we've got going on. We've got him traced to this location, and we're headed that way.
After 6.5 months of searching for Siebert, the anticipation of his arrest was at the forefront of the detectives' minds.
The journey up there was, it's almost like waiting for your birthday party. We were all extremely excited.
Well, by the time we got there, it was late night, and we decided not to do anything but send one investigator in there to see if they could see anything to the search first, because you had this service station where the call was from, and then you had a restaurant up here, and then you had another filling station, a restaurant up here. So one investigator went in, kind of knew the owner, and said, yeah, he's been painting some signs for me, and he'll be in here in the morning to collect his check.
It would be a sleepless night for the arresting officers.
Everybody's upbeat. Everybody's tired, but everybody's upbeat. And I don't think a single one of us took a nap that night out there on the road, because we were just on the roadway, waiting for morning.
The following morning, the 5th of September 1986, the team were ready to pounce as dawn broke over Hurricane Mills.
It's hard to describe what it was like sitting there waiting for him to come around the building, but I'd always wondered if I'd recognize him when I saw him. When he rounded the corner of that building, there was no doubt in my mind, that's him. As soon as he went in the door, Dennis and I were out the door. We went in behind him. He wasn't there. Scared us to death. We just looked at the clerks. Where is he? And she pointed to the restroom. And we went in. And TBI and the captain went in and arrested him in the men's room. And his only question to us was, how'd y'all find me?
I mean, he's got about 6 weapons just aimed at him, and he's caught with his pants down, basically. We seized his backpack. We found where he'd been staying in a car, a wrecked out car behind the station. And he is immediately taken to the court in Tennessee. And we contacted our governor and asked her for her plane to fly him back.
Finally, Daniel Siebert was in police custody. He would never be free again.
I mean, man alive, you can't imagine the relief you feel. We've got him. He's not going to hurt anybody else. And there again, you're thinking of Sherry, and you're thinking of the babies, and Linda, and Linda Odom. You're thinking about them. Okay, we can put everybody to rest now. And it's the best feeling in the world.
The police had their man, but the job was far from done. Detectives were certain he was responsible for the murders of 5 people in the small community. Linda Odom, Linda Jarman, Sherry Weathers, and her 2 sons, Chad and Joey. Investigators had stacks of evidence against Siebert, but they were hoping an interview with the 32-year-old would uncover even more secrets.
It was tense for me, and I'm sure it was for the captain, because we were wanting to get a confession. This was the end of a long, hard battle for us, and we wanted him to admit what he had done.
Siebert told Eugene about the 5 murders he'd committed on the 19th of February 1986, and also confessed to the killing of Beatrice McDougall in Atlantic City on the 8th of March. He showed no remorse for any of the murders.
He wasn't concerned at all. Showed no emotion whatsoever. Never shed a tear. You could tell there was no concern in him about what he had done. And if we had released him right there, he'd have done it again in a few days, because he had no remorse whatsoever for what he'd done. I've told people want to know how he felt about his victims. He didn't feel about his victims. He had no feelings for them one way or the other. He had no feelings for anyone. I don't know that he really felt anything about himself, to be honest with you. He had no feelings.
I think he was a psychopath. I think he demonstrated every normal, or if you can use the word normal when applied to a psychopath, every possible psychopathic tendency, an utter lack of remorse, an utter lack of conscience, an utter lack of empathy with other people. They were simply objects.
Siebert also confessed to another murder that predated any of the other 6, whilst he was lodging with Donald Hendron in Alabama.
It's early February 1986. Donald Hendron's asleep. Siebert gets out of bed and borrows Donald's car and picks up a girl called Cheryl Evans. She's working as a prostitute in Birmingham and Alabama.
He kidnapped her, robbed her, and killed her, and carried her body to Ohatchee and dumped it in a roadside garbage dump. And then just returned the car like nothing had happened.
That brought the tally of victims to 7, but Eugene was certain there was still more. He had uncovered a telling piece of evidence when searching Siebert's home back in February.
In his apartment, I'd found a road atlas. I'd gone through the road atlas, and out on the West Coast, he had X's with zeros, X's and zeros, and he just had X's. I asked him about those, and he said every place that there was an X with a circle around it is where he had killed someone, and just the X's were robberies. I contacted each of these jurisdictions, and sure enough, each place that there was an X with a circle, they had recover the body.
This is basically Siebert's commemoration of the murders that he's committed. I think every time he looked at that map, he would have felt powerful, he would have felt superior. And we do often see this in cases of serial killers.
Siebert confessed to killing 3 sex workers in Nevada and California in late 1985.
The fact that he's targeted sex workers is really significant for me because he's preying upon these women's vulnerabilities. He's well aware that society does not value these individuals as much as it values others, and therefore he has access to them, he has the opportunity to harm them.
He was also indicted for the murder of Beatrice McDougall, but never went to trial for this. Despite admitting to as many as 13 murders, detectives could only link 10 victims to the 32-year-old. But for his impending trials, Siebert would only be indicted for the murders of the 5 that had been thoroughly investigated in Alabama.
There was 5 homicides. Linda Jarman was a capital case because it was murdered during the commission of a robbery or a theft of getting a car. Sherry Weathers, Chad, and Joey was a capital case because it was murder of 2 or more people pursuant to a common plan, scheme, or design. Linda Odom was not a capital case. He pled guilty to Linda Odom after all of this life sentence.
During 3 trials over the course of 5 months between March and August 1987, Siebert was found guilty of all 5 murders and sentenced to death twice.
I've probably tried 30 death penalty cases or more, but this one, it's just the magnitude of it and what makes another human being go do something like this. I mean, you got a woman that's deaf that he's intimate with, a 4 and 5-year-old who he wakes up from their sleep to strangle, goes to another deaf woman and kills her just to get her car to get out of there. I mean, just stick in your mind, it'll be there on my deathbed.
I think the sentences that he received were appropriate. I think he committed the most serious of crimes, so that deserves the most serious of sentence. But I think if we were to ask his victims' families, they're not going to have their loved ones brought back. I think they have achieved some sense of justice, but at the same time, I think they were asking a lot of questions as to how this man had slipped off the radar of the authorities. This man had committed a homicide in 1979, and he went on to commit more. So could more have been done to prevent that?
I think one of the things that always moves me most about this story is that when he was asked about the killing of Sherry Ann and the boys, he said Sherry didn't have anything to say, Joey didn't have anything to say, Chad didn't have anything to say, and I don't have anything to say. If there's anything that could be more heartless, more utterly revolting, more depraved than that remark, I have yet to hear it. And this is a man who snuffed out the life of a deaf 24-year-old mother and her 2 children aged 5 and 4. It is utterly monstrous.
In August 1987, Daniel Siebert began his death row sentence. For 18 months, the case had consumed the investigators who had worked on it. Now they could breathe a sigh of relief.
I still think about those 2 little boys. And always will, I'm sure. I'm sure Dennis and other investigators do too, because they all had children too.
I don't know what it is, but I know he's a psychotic killer. And had he not been taken in Tennessee, that's what's so outstanding about the police work. Had he not been taken in Tennessee, I don't know whether it would have been Arkansas, Oklahoma, Nevada, Utah, or California, but somebody else would have died. And he wasn't through.
After numerous unsuccessful appeals throughout the years, 53-year-old Siebert remained on death row for almost 21 years.
On April 22nd, 2008, Daniel Siebert died, but not from lethal injection, from pancreatic cancer, natural causes. In the end, he escaped the death penalty.
I mean, this was a personal type of crime. This is not something that you're standing 30 feet away, you shoot somebody. This is someone you put your hands around their neck and choke the life out of them. That's bad. Think about that. 'Cause it takes anywhere from 2 to 4 minutes to do that to someone. And you're sitting there and you got your hands around their neck and you're taking the life from them. You got to be enjoying that, otherwise you wouldn't do it that way. And if you're enjoying something like that, man, you are bad. And I just wish we had got to electrocute him. I think we felt we were cheated for that.
Daniel Siebert was linked to at least 10 murders and was convicted of 5, but he never tried to justify his reason for killing people.
For me, what makes Siebert one of the world's most evil killers is the degree of manipulativeness that he was able to exercise. He was able to come across as an individual with feelings, as an individual who cared about others, but those feelings were not genuine at all. They were simply a performance.
He was an absolute monster. He was a horrible person. He really was. And that's what comes to mind anytime anyone mentions his name. He was a monster.
Daniel Siebert was a callous killer who felt no remorse. To choke the life out of 2 children simply because he felt they would never amount to much is a cold-blooded act that cannot be forgiven. We may never know exactly how many lives he took, but Siebert's death means he can no longer harm anyone and will forever be remembered as one of the world's most evil killers.